Hello, and welcome to the Asking a Christian podcast, episode 2. Asking a Christian podcast is, of course, in association with our website, askingachristian.org, where you can ask all of your questions concerning the Bible, Jesus, Christianity, anything like that. But, of course, we do also encourage any questions from those who don't believe or people who want to question from a place of perhaps skepticism or disbelief. If you'd like to ask a question, please go ahead and visit our website at www.askingachristian.org and click on the link that says Asking a Christian, or you can call or text 602 529 2530. And please indicate in both your email or your message that you leave or text whether or not you'd like your question answered privately or if you'd like to have it answered on the show. Our first topic is dreams and visions. I'm asked about dreams and visions and things like that quite often. I receive probably at least a couple of emails each week about different visions and dreams that people have had and how how they should interpret them or what they should take from them. And as many people as actually contact me with that question, I think there's probably even a greater number of people who don't. Just because, when we start talking about things like dreams and visions, it's kind of one of those topics where a lot of people kind of raise their eyebrows and give you that funny look. And some people are not even so polite as that. They just kind of, start making fun of you and giving you a hard time. And, so that makes people definitely a lot more apprehensive about, delving into the concept of whether or not what they dreamed or what they perceived actually meant something. Was it actually a communication from God? Now, of course, if it was from God, we definitely want to know that. We don't want to miss out on something God has in store for us because we were unsure or too afraid to try to work through what we saw, what we perceived. Now, I will say, and I know this is probably disappointing to many people who have this question, there's not really a clear-cut answer that can be given in a situation like this. When one receives a vision or a dream, especially from God, it's important to understand that communication is a custom-made communication specifically designed to communicate with you, with the one receiving this vision or this dream. It really kind of makes it very difficult for somebody who's not you to give you a really accurate answer. God is an exceptional communicator, of course. He doesn't waste words. He doesn't waste imagery. These are all things that were selected to communicate with that person receiving it because it's based on who they are. It's something that would really speak to them in a way that it couldn't to any other person. Now, in Scripture, dreams and visions kind of break up into two different main categories. There are visions and dreams that are given to people like prophets, Daniel, Isaiah, Elijah, that kind of person, where the information is presented, at least in the text, in such a way that God spoke to them. There really wasn't a question whether or not it was God. They didn't seem to have any trouble really deciphering what it was God wanted, because usually after the verse reads, the word of the Lord came, the following scripture usually starts off with, so they got up and went, doing whatever it was that the word of the Lord came and said to them. So that's our first category is direct vision or dream. And the other category is, and this happens a few times in Scripture, where a dream or a vision is given to a non-believer, but eventually that person has to bring the information to a believer to decipher it for them. And this happens in the case of Joseph and the Pharaoh, It happens in the case of King Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel. It's not an uncommon theme. So pretty much they break down into those two um, categories within Scripture. Now, in addition to that, I will also add, though, that there are times in my experience where there is, in fact, a communication from God in such a way. It could be a dream, it could be a vision, it could just be a voice. But that it's not necessarily prophecy, it's really kind of more a personal, communication from God regarding yourself. Just regarding God kind of stopping you and reminding you that he's there, that he's with you, or kind of confirming to you a path that you may have been thinking about or praying about, or just try to help you stay on the right track. Or in some cases, and this again is something that I've had in my personal experience, is the vision or the dream that shows you, later on maturity or position or just growth, where you're kind of shown yourself in the light of having progressed to a certain point or doing certain things that at the time that you receive that vision or that dream are kind of confusing or even unheard of, or just perplexing to you, because that's really not what you're doing when you receive that. And that's kind of more of a vision or a dream that's meant to steer you onto the path, as opposed to the previous, which was, keeping you on the right path. Now, I usually feel kind of bad when people ask me about this, just because I know that this is a frustrating answer. Unfortunately, it's the only answer that I think is appropriate due to, experience and stuff that I've learned in my time and my walk with God. It's kind of, as I said before, it's very personal. And I'll share with you an experience that I had personally in a little bit more detail now. I obviously, at a certain point, had a period in my life where I had several very vivid, very, mind-blowing dreams that were just too detailed and too not me, so much so that it really, took effect. I remembered these dreams so very detailed. It was just, definitely strange. At least for me, at that point, I'd never had any kind of experience like that before. So it was abnormal, and it definitely caused me to take notice and to remember. And I immediately felt this connection between that and spirituality. Now, at the time I was much younger, I was not I was a believer in God, but I was not an extremely outspoken or well-read Christian at that time. So, having had these dreams, I went to a couple different pastors that I knew at the time, and I told them all about the dream, all the specific details and everything. And basically, there was two different pastors. Both of them kind of responded in such a way that it was, um, you know, definitely something to take note of. It was definitely something out of the ordinary. It was definitely something that they felt to be communication from God, and there was really definitely a message in there. But neither one of them after that point would really venture any kind of actual interpretation. And see, I remember at that time being really kind of disappointed that they would give me this great big build up, telling me, yeah, that's definitely something special. That's definitely something from God. That's awesome. That's great. And then, gotta go. And I was just kind of like, well, I definitely don't have the skills required to figure out what this means. And here I am speaking with somebody that I, at the time, expected would know more and have information that I wouldn't have, be able to help me in a way that I could not help myself. And these are the people basically telling me, fantastic, you're on your own, and taking off. And I was upset for a while. And, honestly, at the end of this particular experience, when I finally did come to the realization, and mind you, this was 8 years later That's as much time as it took before I understood what these visions were about. And that's a very long period of time, but of course God knows what he's doing, and I really would not have been able to do anything with the information contained in those dreams had it taken any less time, to be honest with you. But at the time I felt really kind of um, frustrated. I was thinking, I got this information, I have this connection with God, I have nothing to do with it. What's going on? I questioned God, I questioned the people around me, and it was annoying. And I know that when people come to me and ask this question, they probably are somewhat annoyed with my answer when I tell them the same thing. I try to make it a little bit less annoying by letting them know this particular story and letting them know how long it took, and how much time I just had to wait and learn, because really one of the side effects of this situation was that I really dug into and really learned scripture very well in hopes of figuring out what was going on. Even at the time, not knowing scripture so well, I still at that time figured, if God has something to say to me, who else should I listen to? And if what it takes to listen is to learn, then by all means, let's learn. So I hope that you can take into consideration, if you've had a dream or a vision that you feel is definitely something significant, that you can take heart in the fact that it's not always simple, but that it can become more simplistic to understand, so long as you wait on God, that you pray, that you draw closer to him, because obviously if he's given you a message and you at the moment can't figure out what it means, then drawing near to him is really the best method to learn what it is that it means. And let me give you an example here. Again, referring back to scripture, when we look at the people that really get a lot of visions, a lot of calling in their life, your prophets, your big names, especially, let's take Abraham, for example, who, he spoke to God often. Moses spoke to God often in person. Elijah, Daniel, all these prophets, of course, Jesus, even some of the apostles that had such a connection with God, that when they received revelation from God, it was not, it was never a question. They didn't have to sit there and wonder and worry and pray and ask themselves if they thought it was really God, or spend a lot of time in inaction, basically, or hesitating to act because they were unsure. These are people that were ready to stand up and walk at a moment's notice based on whether or not God spoke to them. And how did that happen? It comes not only from hearing God, because I think God talks to everybody in a way, even those that really don't understand that, or aren't thinking or expecting God to speak to them, or people that, like most of us, may have heard, a whisper, a voice, seen a vision, had a dream, and just dismissed it because it was, we've been told basically our whole lives that dreams are just manifestations of your subconscious. It's just your mind reenacting past experiences and all this kind of stuff. And basically, it's all just reasons to dismiss what passes through your mind. But if you have the ability to, learn the scripture, so you understand how to discern or judge what is good and what is evil, what's you and what might be God, and then over time learn to have faith in what God has to say to you, then I think you'll find, like many of these men in the Bible, that the communication that God is capable of having with you will grow by leaps and bounds. God will communicate with you, but if you're just going to sit there and him and haw and worry about what he said, or if it's him, or that kind of stuff, it's kind of a process like any other process. You kind of have to learn what you're looking for, hone your skill, so to speak, and become used to it, and expect God to communicate with you. If you're expecting it, and if you're willing to believe it, and if you have that mentality like, like any of these men in the Bible, that if God speaks, I'm going to stand up right in the middle of whatever I'm doing, and I'm going to walk out and go do whatever it is he said. Then of course God has much more of the mindset that he needs to communicate. You have to really kind of think about how many people he communicates to that aren't hearing him. They don't want to, or they don't understand, or they're just not quite mature enough spiritually yet. So if you feel like you are a mature Christian or spiritually mature, that's kind of part of it. Are you willing to get up and walk? Are you willing to listen? Do you want to understand what your visions mean, or your dreams? Or if you are not never had a vision or a dream, or you don't feel like God communicates with you, but you want more than anything to have that experience, faith is really where it starts. If you don't believe God can talk to you, then why would you believe it when he does talk to you? If you're not sure what God might have you do because you don't know, based on scripture, how to tell when it's God talking, because the Bible does tell us exactly how you can, perceive anything, a person, a word, somebody speaking or whatever. It tells us exactly how we can systematically look at what's being produced by that and tell whether or not it's from God or not. And so, again, this is part of that spiritual maturity, knowing when you hear God's voice and knowing that it's your duty to get up and go. That's what makes these visions and these dreams really powerful. Before that, it's just kind of an anomaly or something that, it might make you feel nice, but, ultimately you want to be a Christian, or you want to be a follower of Jesus, of God. And, everybody hears these fantastic stories from the Bible, and they kind of get discouraged in the fact that while there are these people that were doing miracles and leading large groups of people and doing all these great things for God, that they are not really included in that group, and they can't do anything that great, or that God's use for them is something smaller or less significant. And the truth is, you'll never know really how big a calling God has on you if you're unwilling to believe in God rather than what it is you believe you should be doing, because this is God's directive, not our own. So again, like I said, I know that this is kind of it's a lot of information to answer a question that you're not really answering, because ultimately when I'm asked this question, it's because somebody's like, this is what I've been seeing, this is what I've been dreaming, this is what it keeps happening, I don't understand it. It's got me kind of worried, it's got me frustrated, it has me confused, I don't know what to do. And nobody likes to get that answer. Well, maybe you should read about it, or something like that. And I feel bad because it's kind of a dismissive answer, but unfortunately what I know now is that way back when I asked pastors to help me out and they didn't have a particular answer for me, that really that was the wisest answer that they could have given me, because it wasn't theirs to interpret. That was God's specific word to me personally. And anything that they had to say, even if they guessed parts of it correctly or not, it wasn't going to be the full and perfect message that God had intended for me. So again, it's a matter of faith. And I'm sure that there are some cases where God will send a vision or a dream to you and or to to somebody, and that it is meant that you would speak up and tell somebody and see if they have an interpretation. And God can very easily send that interpretation through the person that you communicate with about it. It's not I wouldn't say it's a very common thing, but it's definitely possible. You shouldn't be afraid of those things. If we believe God can communicate with us, then we should probably be proud of the communications he sends us, and not be ashamed or worried that people might think we're crazy, because at the end of the day, if God did say something to you, it really doesn't matter who thinks you're crazy because God has something to say to you.